While as Ukraine faces growing pressure on the battlefield, a new mobilisation law comes into force today. The legislation lowers the age at which men can be drafted into the army from 27 to 25. It also tightens punishment for those guilty of draft evasion. President Zelensky is hoping to boost ranks depleted by over 2 years of fighting, with many soldiers dead, wounded, or struggling with fatigue. Well, with more, we can now turn to Douglas Herbert, our international affairs editor. Douglas Herbert, our international affairs editor. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio, Douglas. So this new mobilization law takes effect today. It's been hotly debated. Will it be enough to replenish troops, do you think?
In the very short term, probably not. I say that because, look, Ukraine's army is absolutely desperate right now to get new recruits, to, as you said, to replenish forces that have been very badly depleted. Remember, many of these men, and on both sides, there have been reportedly tens of thousands of casualties and deaths. And in many cases, some of these men, servicemen, have been serving since really the beginning of the war, more than 2 years ago, and there's been no respite. The problem is this: it's the new draft law. Yeah, there's a clause in it to lower the age down to 25, so from 27 to 25. Also, Zelensky, perhaps not coincidentally, signed a law just yesterday allowing convicts to be drafted, not those wanted for the worst crimes such as rape and murder, which Russia had earlier actually been doing, but those who are in prison on lesser crimes to serve and perhaps have parole at the end of their service. So that would maybe bring in about 20,000 more. The estimates, though, are that Ukraine needs about, perhaps hundreds of thousands of troops really to be able to match what has been a far superior in terms of manpower and equipment Russian forces which have been advancing, as we know, especially in this new ground offensive in the northeastern region around Kharkiv. Ukraine is up against it right now. It has no time to waste. These men have to be trained as well, and that could take a few months. Sure, you could train them in a month and send unprepared troops to defend Ukraine, but that won't be as effective. It's a very fine balance, a very difficult decision. So when you ask me too little, too late, they needed the mobilization law. No one's disputing that. The question is the mechanics, the logistics, and really what happens, the dynamics on the ground in the face of this Russian really onslaught recently, intensified onslaught.
And Volodymyr Zelensky has actually reached out to China's President Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
He's just fresh from hosting Vladimir Putin for a state visit. What did Zelensky ask?
He's pleading for support from China. Look, I said the war's been going on for more than 2 years. China has not at all condemned the war. Yes, it is said it supports the integrity of Ukraine and its territory, but that is not the same as outright condemning the war, which Volodymyr Zelensky has clearly wanted him to do. From Zelensky's standpoint, China is perhaps one of the only powers, maybe the only power in the world that could really bring some leverage and influence to bear on Vladimir Putin. And meanwhile, he sees Putin in China in the past few days. That visit's now over. The two leaders side by side pledging a new era of partnership, sees China continuing to trade a lot with Russia, helping it to get around the Western sanctions. All he wants, he really wants China to participate in this conference, a conference that is to be held in Switzerland, to which Russia has not been invited, because the terms that Russia is asking on the ground are not seen as acceptable or realistic for any sort of peace or negotiation. But Switzerland's hoping to attract a lot of countries from the so-called global south, as well as China, and that means China has not given a definitive answer, but it hasn't ruled out going to this conference. This is what Zelensky's trying to do. He knows that China is in a difficult geopolitical situation here. It wants to have a relationship with Russia, especially to face off against the U.S. hegemon as they see it, Russia and China. But he also thinks and he hopes he could still, in a limited way at least, get China on side. It would be more than just symbolic. It could have real influence brought to bear on Vladimir Putin.
Douglas Herbert, our international affairs editor, thank you so much for your time.